For those of you that don't know me, I'm Racine County Executive Jonathan Delagrave. And I just want to welcome the heads of government, all of our elected officials here, guests from the real estate, construction, and lending community. I really appreciate you guys, again, taking an hour and a half to 2 hours tonight to talk about housing and really learn quite a bit. We walked through this presentation in this study, or one of the studies last week, and I actually was pretty amazed about the data, and not surprisingly, I didn't know as much as I thought. So before we get started, though, I would be remiss to say that the person who really runs the county, my assistant, Dawn, went to the trouble of getting all that food out there, and I know she doesn't want to take that home, and I don't want to take that home, so you are not going to offend me while I'm speaking if you get up and partake in some food. I would rather you do it while I'm speaking than our guest speakers tonight. So that leads us to our two speakers that we have that will focus on residential development. And I'll just introduce both gentlemen in a few minutes, but really, in addition to sharing some of the beneficial information that I just talked about with our municipal leaders and friends from the development community, I also will encourage each of you to network after this evening. I think that would be beneficial as well, because I think once we go through the presentations, the information that you guys talk informally, I think you'll learn even more. So what brought us to this evening? And I guess I'm clicking the thing too. All right, just gonna do that. All right. So what really brought us here this evening? Really, over the last 3 years, RCDC and Racine County have really formed a strong partnership. We've announced 58 business expansions and recruitment projects that have included over $700 million in private investment and have resulted in 1,000 new jobs in Racine County. So I think that's something that just not RCDC in the county, but all of us really have come together and worked together to achieve some of those great goals. In addition to this project directly involving RCDC, we've also celebrated several construction projects that include Advocate Aurora's groundbreaking in Mount Pleasant, Ashley Capital's spec building development in Sturtevant, Hillwood's spec building development in Yorkville, and several other projects across Racine County that total more than $870 million in capital investment. So it's important to know that the jobs that will result from these projects are just not included in the 1,000 that I just mentioned. So shortly after the Foxconn announcement in October of 2017, Racine County led an effort to bolster the workforce resources available to our local employers. Our new program that resulted from this was RCEDC's Talent Recruitment Initiative, the Greater Racine County Program, as we call it. This program was meant to complement existing workforce and educational resources to meet our growing talent challenges. So now we have development underway. We have our workforce partners actively engaged with our educators and our residents and our other municipalities as well. And we have RCDC now working to attract new talent into Racine County. So really, what is the next question? Or the next question should be, where are we all going to live? Where are residents going to locate in each of our municipalities, and what's going to be the best fit for themselves and their families as they look for residential development, which best suits them. So to begin this, to address this, Racine County and RCDC engaged a multi-consultant team to work with our communities to identify land sites conducive for residential development. With this good planning in hand, some municipal leaders have expressed a concern about the mix and number of housing units needed. Aptly so. I think that's good. Similar to how we've addressed other challenges. We believe good data leads to good decisions. So really, with that data, we hope that you'll learn more and really ultimately, as we come together, making good decisions. One thing that I've learned from our first speaker that I'm about to introduce, he taught me a term called sphere of influence. And I didn't know what really that meant at first, or maybe I thought I knew what it meant and I don't. But really, we really all need to come together because we're losing our sphere of influence in terms of housing, in terms of attracting people here for our economic development. And if we don't grow and grow the way we want to as municipalities, we're going to lose out on not only good growth, but we're going to lose out on disposable income. And eventually, it trickles down or it ripples down to being hard to attract new development and even more jobs. So we all have to come together. We need to make that sphere of influence. We need to be, quite frankly, we need to have leverage and we need to have influence on our county and on the communities and our municipalities in which we live in. So our first speaker, and I might have missed a slide, sorry. No, I didn't, good. Our first speaker is Erik Doersching from Tracy Cross and Associates. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Erik and his firm, as he's often engaged by the private sector for residential developments. Erik is going to deliver the Racine County housing presentation, and following it, we will take some of your questions, time permitting, and then I'll come back up here and introduce our next speaker, Kurt Paulsen. So with that, it's my honor to introduce Erik Doersching from Tracy Cross. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to try this up here, see how that works. Good evening, everyone. Let's see. Okay, so we were charged with conducting a residential market analysis for Racine County, and just to outline the goals and objectives of our analysis, I'm here to provide an understanding of relevant economic, demographic, and construction trends as they may influence future residential development throughout the county. We also want to give you a really good assessment of the competitive environment, the residential marketplace as it exists today, so that we can look toward what could exist in the future. And then ultimately, all of this work that we did is to end by providing some detailed planning guidelines, product development criteria, general rent and pricing recommendations, so that it can be used as a guide by the county and all the municipalities as they work toward promoting new housing development within the county. Just real briefly, I mean, you obviously all are familiar with the geographic boundaries of Racine County, but I wanted to throw this up here just to emphasize that our focus of the study was countywide, the entire county and all the municipalities in it, and really just to show this in perspective of the southern reaches of the Milwaukee region, as well as Kenosha County to the south, because I will bring in some elements of influence that are being derived from those areas that are important for everyone here to understand. One of the reasons that I think our firm was brought in to give a very objective and unbiased analysis of Racine County was, if you look at southeast Wisconsin, and let's, for the purpose of this analysis, we're calling it the 4-county Milwaukee metropolitan area, Racine and Kenosha counties, okay? So Racine ranks third in total population, yet it's ranking last in residential construction activity in terms of number of new units being built. So this table's just an emphasis that in southeast Wisconsin, Racine County does rank last in actual construction activity for new housing, yet it's the third most populous county in the region, and that in southeast Wisconsin. So That's, I think, one of the reasons we're here is the desire to maybe change that over time. Racine County has had positive employment since 2011 with the exception of 1 year. While it falls below on a percentage basis the nation, it still has remained positive, and actually the net number of new jobs since 2011 has been over 5,000. Okay, yet building permit activity since the national housing downturn that really began in 2007, they have stayed pretty much level since that period, despite constant economic and employment growth, okay? And so what's interesting is, as a housing economist, one very simple element of study when you look at an area, and a market area, is that really for every 1.5 to 2 jobs that are created, you need a new housing unit, okay? And so right now, the average since 2011 has been 2.4 to 1, which means that the number of jobs is exceeding the number of new housing units being built. In fact, back in 11 and 12, when just over 100 permits countywide were being authorized, employment to permit ratios were 9.3 to 1, 4.9 to 1, even 7.2 to 1 in 2014. Yet just another gauge to show you that the market is undersupplied in terms of the number of new housing units that should be produced. Our overall residential analysis, I think, concluded with some very key elements and key points that are important for us to talk about. Number one, and a lot of this may not be new to many of you, but Racine County has very limited, proprietary for-sale communities that are done by a builder or builders, where you have a fixed set of floor plans. You can come in and choose maybe some elements of minor customization. That's very limited. Instead, in the second bullet point, new for-sale construction in the single-family sector primarily consists of scattered lot subdivisions, development in communities that had once shuttered and are now reopened, et cetera. There's very little activity in terms of any proprietary subdivisions or communities of scale. Lot supplies are very low. We did an audit of on-the-ground audit of all single-family. So there's 33 single-family developments countywide that have developed lots. 1,623 total lots. Almost 1,200 already have home lot packages on them, which leaves a supply of sold vacant lots of just 164 and total unsold vacant lots at 275. Those numbers are very low. In the attached sector of the market, which would be condominiums, townhomes, duplexes, so anything that's not a single-family detached home, there's less than 10 developments countywide that are actively selling new product, many of which are smaller in scale and represent development on residual acreage. The planning pipeline in the for-sale sector of the market also is showing limited proposal activity throughout the county in terms of future housing development, especially anything with a significant number of units. Going back, the second to last bullet point, the lack of properly positioned for-sale housing product is putting extreme pressure on the existing home market. I have 4 slides for this. It's extremely important to understand. And then we'll jump right into the rental apartment sector because there's significant pent-up demand for new construction rental apartments. If you can see this, these are single-family. I'm going to start with single-family closing activity in the county for the last 3 years. Hovers around 2,300 closing single-family every year. Since 2017, the price in the single-family sector has increased 6.5 or above each year. But what is most staggering is that the average days on market now has plummeted from 61 days in 2017 to 40 to 37 days on market in 2019. Typically, 72 to 90 days is is generally a balanced time period to sell a resale home. When you get to the attached sector, much lower level of activity because there's not as much inventory in the existing home market in terms of condominiums or townhomes or duplexes. Prices here, though, have jumped double digits in the last 2 years, and again, the average days on market are dropping dramatically. And I think what's happening here is employment growth has continued, very little construction activity, and all of a sudden, extreme pressure is being placed on the existing home market, which will continue. What this table shows is your total number of closings last year, and this is single family, and then the current listings as of January 15th of this year, okay? Looking at that, it provides you the opportunity to look at months supply based upon closing activity and what's listed. In a normal or balanced market, you're typically be anywhere between 4 and 6 months of inventory. In Racine County, up until you get to the really till you get to the $400,000 and above price range, you're under 4. Or under 4 up to 350, and then still under 5 up to 400,000. So again, another gauge showing the pressure that's being put on the existing home market because of the lack of new construction for sale housing. Same is occurring in townhome duplex inventory. In fact, it's even lower at price points in the 150 to 200 mark even. That's just 2.8 months supply, still below 4 months, all the way up to 300,000. So, the lack of new construction residential development is being seen in other sectors of the housing market. Getting to the rental apartment sector. We did a survey did a sampling of large-scale rental apartments developments, most of which are older Class B, Class C type developments, simply because there's no new construction. This sector, I think the important number here, while it shows location, year built, total units, is the fact that the market is 1.2% vacant. So in a normal or balanced market, vacancies are typically between 5 and 6% to allow for filtering and movement from one development to another. This market is extremely tight at 1.2%. Only one new apartment development has been constructed in all of Racine County in the last 15 years. It's a new one, the Granary in Union Grove, 73-unit development that's just getting going, still under construction. There's just 3 additional developments under construction but not yet leasing countywide: Tivoli Green in Mount Pleasant by Vanguard, and 2 pre-3 real estate developments, one in Waterford and one in Union Grove. However, the Foxconn news, which we'll get to later, has not gone unnoticed, and I think some of the success in Kenosha County and to the north in Oak Creek area, that there's another 2,300 units currently in the planning pipeline. However, we don't fully know if all of those will move forward, yet there is a lot of interest in the rental apartment sector, and rightfully so, with what is preliminarily in the planning pipeline. Yet still, I think the point here is, relative to those developments actually moving forward, still very limited considering nothing of scale has been built in the last 15 years. Just to give you a perspective on how things are doing both north and south of Racine County, double-digit absorption rates are being generated in Pleasant Prairie, St. Francis, Oak Creek, Kenosha. Here's a list of developments that have been, at least 60 units or more have been absorbed or are absorbing, and you can see on the far right-hand column, absorption rates have ranged anywhere from 10 units per month up to a high of over 26 units per month. So the apartment market that is occurring in southeast Wisconsin nearby Racine County is performing extremely well. This is really a table that I think, and these slides will be made available to you through our analysis of pent-up demand, recent employment growth, expected household additions, future employment growth, et cetera. we're forecasting 4,450 new housing units across all market segments could be absorbed over the next 5 years. It's just under 900 a year. Also, it's very important to point out, so this is broken down 2,800 in the for sale sector, 1,600 in the rental sector. Now, the first thing is, any one of these market components, actually that demand base in a pent-up area, we have seen countless times in similar markets like Racine County, where demand can double during a given year where supply is actually made available. This might be true and is likely to come true if certain apartment developments locally enter the market in a given year. We don't think that will happen in the for sale housing sector because it takes longer to plan some of those and there's nothing in the pipeline right now. But these demand forecasts, while realistic, our last bullet point, in reality, it's highly likely that demand will exceed supply, even with planning efforts starting today to induce residential development to the county. It's unlikely that this demand will be met. Now, what we used for Foxconn, just to give you an idea, is we did a sensitivity analysis of various employment counts and really said, okay, let's just use 5,000 new jobs as a reasonable number through 2025, okay? Just to say that's a reasonable number, and that's factored into this, but upside potentials, not only is demand likely to exceed supply, upside potentials do exist on anything upside to Foxconn itself, supplier companies serving Foxconn, which aren't factored in. You've got new medical centers under construction or planned near the Foxconn facility. There's expansion possibilities among any existing company. And then there's spillover potentials from the north and south, okay? So, and let me touch on that a little bit because it's important. What is happening in the for sale sector, the market in Racine County, in the for sale sector, is evident in Kenosha County and southern Milwaukee as well, where supply is limited, and we'll get to price in a second, where the price of housing has gone up. So there are spillover potentials if the Racine County municipalities can align product properly. Also, Racine County workers who are seeking out new construction rental communities, young professionals, et cetera, have no product availability locally, so we are seeing them being picked up in developments to the north and south. That could revert back if supply is made available. So there's all kinds of upsides, not just Foxconn, but other upside potentials that could improve even the demand base that exists. Household growth, just to give you an example, has dropped during the 2010 to 2020 period, about half of what it was during the previous decade, and that's a function of supply more than anything, as well as a note of a certain portion of that time frame we were in a deep housing recession. But the U.S. Census Bureau feels that conservatively that Racine County can get back up to 385 households. That's factored into our demand forecast, and we too believe that to be very conservative. Just owner-occupied housing units is the dominant sector in the county, 70%, yet renter-occupied households total 23,000. While it may be just 30% countywide, it's a big number, especially with no new product available. I know I'm bouncing back and forth between for sale and rental, and that's because it's important to connect the two. This is equally as important to understand as it relates to the undersupply, because meeting the demand also means trying to figure out how to produce the product at a price point that will allow the majority of the residents to desire that product, okay? There is a disconnect right now in the for sale sector. So the first column of this graphic, what it does is it's a qualitative distribution of for sale housing demand, okay, based upon home buyers' incomes, okay, of a home buying age. The median there is 284 based upon Racine County incomes, yet What's happening in terms of new closings, so is a $870,000 closing rate. So there's a 20% difference of where products should fully be aligned and where it's actually occurring. Now, one of the reasons is because this county doesn't produce enough attached for sale product, okay? So, and what they do in the single family sector tends to lean higher. So what that's doing is creating a disconnect between where the distribution of demand should exist and where it currently is happening, and that too keeps absorption down and doesn't allow you to satisfy the demand levels. To give you an idea, here's home buying age groups, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64, and by income break. And you can see it's a relatively even distribution. Just starts to drop when you get to $125,000 household incomes across these levels, but showing you that really in these age groups, which are primary home buying ages, you're looking at still 50% of all households are earning between $50,000 and $100,000, and some of those will be renters, but the majority of these age groups are still looking at for sale product, and yet very little available to them at that income level. If you look at the rental sector, 70% of all households in Racine County earn $40,000 or more annually. For new product that you see in Kenosha or in Oak Creek, really that's kind of the starting salary for where you can enter some of the newer, higher end product that are highly amenitized. So you still have 54,000 out of 77,000 households that earn that amount. And then among the 12,000 households that are 35 and younger, which is a primary renter classification, 62% of them earn 40,000 or more. So there is no new product for a very sizable younger demographic profile, again, that can afford new construction rental product. You have another 22,000 households in the 55 to 74 group who also consider rental housing, earning 40,000 or more, and again, no new supply. This is interesting. 62% of all households in Racine County are two-person or less. Okay, so there's no rental for those groups, and there's very little attached for sale product. Two generic forms that really appeal to that segment of the market. You still have sizable groups in the family segment from 3 to 4 to 5 person, but really no way to currently address the majority of household composition in the county. So how do we meet demand? Okay, 3 key things here. For meeting this demand that exists. Work toward establishing a true hierarchy of product throughout the county, where you start with rental apartments and you end with custom homes, and then focusing on apartment activity at a variety of locations along with the guts of the market, which we call the mainstream or the production sector of the market. Now, creating this hierarchy really needs to be embraced to do it right by each community throughout Racine County. And leading to my second point, that municipalities or county agencies need to work closely with developers and builders so that projects are strategically positioned relative location, product, rents, and prices. The future of new housing, new construction housing in Racine County must be orchestrated. And so I can leave you with information and highlights of what our study found, but I think going beyond this presentation, somehow you all have to come together to create a plan for achieving this countywide, okay? Establishing desirable communities of scale, ideally, okay, through creative land planning, multiple product lines, tasteful architecture, amenities, and adequate landscaping, hardscaping, all while being extremely cognizant to price or rent positioning. Now, we're not talking about sacrificing quality, but rather looking at ways to provide quality at more moderate price points to the end consumer. Color schemes instead of certain materials, more modest lot sizes, higher densities. And higher densities doesn't mean lower value. It can be the opposite. It's just thinking differently on how to produce quality product where the land price and the land cost can be distributed in a more efficient way. Also incentives. Some incentives may be required. What this table does is this is a mainstream hierarchy that can be used as a gauge by anyone in the county for understanding where products should be positioned. It starts with two forms of rental apartments. Garden apartments, which are two-story, typical walk-up products with some attached garages, some detached, and then higher density, which is a typical southeast Wisconsin, 3 stories over 1 level of structured parking. Gives you rent ranges and footage ranges as a guide, and these are really for developments that are larger in scale and will have a full breadth of amenities. We then get into offering 2 key components to the attached sector. Conventional townhomes or flat over flat product, as well as duplex, triplex, or fourplex product in the price points that really will help bridge the gap that exists between, that I showed you earlier, between incomes and closing activity. Then we get into age-targeted single family because of the movement and the growth that's occurring in the 55 to 74 group, into conventional single family 1, single family 2, and semi-custom. So this is a guide. It gives footage ranges, price ranges, averages, and absorption potentials so that really when you're looking at new housing developments, you can utilize this to see where it falls. Now keep in mind, these we call base rent or sales prices. They do not include options, upgrades, or premiums. So this is a home lot package with a very good, solid base of standard features, etc. But these prices at the end of the day will be 8% higher than this. And that's footnoted here just so you know. This is a guide for where the starting prices will be for these different product lines. Creating this continuum and this hierarchy county-wide will allow this county to start meeting the demands that exist and fully based upon incomes. Now, yeah, we're looking at price points here that are lower than what's occurring, okay? But we're not talking about homes like these, okay? This is a slide to show you. We're not talking about bringing in value-oriented entry-level product that you may see somewhere around the country. Instead, we're talking about product like this. There's an age-targeted single-family, conventional single-family, 1 and 2, and semi-custom that we believe can be done in Racine County at the price points indicated. This gives you an idea so that you don't think we're sitting up here saying just build low-end homes. That's not what we're saying. It's to think differently in order to bring product like this to market at a more modest price point. Give you an idea of garden versus higher density apartments, as well as conventional townhomes and flats, and duplex, triplex, fourplex. You're probably all familiar with that product since it's prevalent here in the county. The prices that you saw were not arbitrary, okay? They weren't pulled out of a hat. They were carefully calculated based upon number of regression analyses. And instead of boring you with the 20 or 30 that we did, I just have a couple to show you the scatter graph that allows us to perform regression. Here's the apartment product, that red line on the market for Kenosha County. So we're aligning you very similar to Kenosha County. You go a slide later, we got you coming slightly under Oak Creek, but very competitive, very carefully thought out, and it's still, those rents comparable to Kenosha and to the north are for larger scale projects, highly amenitized. You do smaller scale projects maybe at in an in-town location in maybe West Racine County. Yeah, rents will come down a little bit lower than these, but again, it's a very good guide. Here's three of our single-family developments cast against closing activity, single-family closings last year, new construction. You can see we're still in the range of what's occurring, yet we've come right below and on the low end of that market average, and that's to facilitate the absorption rates that can be at the 2 a month range, basically 1.5 to 2 a month, as opposed to what you see now, which is basically 0.6 to 0.9 a month at any development. The hierarchy of product and the mainstream hierarchy is not all that can be done here, okay? There's other opportunities depending on site-specific or larger scale communities. There's neo-traditional alley product with rear access garages in larger scale communities, or you could have rental apartments, you could have 2 types of townhomes, courtyard townhomes, row homes, age-targeted patio homes, which are rear load ranches, small lot single family. They follow the same general price points as the counterparts, can be a little higher depending on location. There's waterfront alternatives that exist with Lake Michigan orientation. The city of Racine is a perfect and ripe spot for residential development right now, for rental apartments, condominiums, urban row homes. There's in-town we call them in-town or infill locations, typically smaller of scale in a number of municipalities, where again, rental apartments, condominiums, urban row homes can be done. There's niche products that may be very unique. It may be 10 units of something. And remember, these are all additive, where the focus needs to be on the mainstream. I would be remiss not to mention that there are also niche opportunities and residential adaptive reuse opportunities that may exist, where the conversion of a former non-residential use to a residential alternative has its place. Here's just an example of very nicely elevated, very efficiently built, and all of these are being produced around the country at price points similar to what Racine County is doing. You see rental apartments, 2 different types of rear load townhomes. Those age-targeted patio homes are rear entry garage. This allows, the reason it comes up is because you get a density allocation that really allows you to spread the cost again across more acres, or the cost across your acreage, and meet the price points that are required in the marketplace. I wanted to mention one thing. I could stand up here and talk about product all night, and how there are so many housing products throughout the Midwest, throughout Wisconsin, throughout Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, so many products, yet product monotony here in Racine County, it's really a lot of the same things that have just been done over and over again. And again, I just want to show you that there are so many different things to think about in terms of getting out there and seeing and understanding new products. Here's 2 rear load townhome developments. One's called a Courtyard, and the reason it's called a Courtyard Townhome is because it's got a rear entry garage, and typically 6-unit buildings of these face each other and create a courtyard in the middle. The other one's a row home. It's 2 stories versus 3 stories. The first one has an integral garage, meaning it's completely underneath or inside the envelope of the building. And the other one is 2 stories because the garage sticks out. And the second one can have a basement. This has a lower level next to the garage in lieu of a basement. These 2 product lines get 13 and 10 units per acre each. And they can be, as I showed, very tastefully elevated. And the reason for just one example is I really want everybody to start thinking differently about what can be produced in the county. Geographic positioning is pretty logical. When it comes to rental apartments, you want high visibility areas, easy access, obviously close proximity to employment, shopping, amenities, and I-94. And then you have to always keep in mind, especially in this county, in place or nearby utilities. Okay, there's 3 areas really of focus, even though other opportunities do exist. Areas within roughly 5 to 6 miles of I-94, primarily east of the interstate, along major corridors such as Highway 11, Highway 20, and Green Bay Road, among some others. Equal to that is looking at infill locations among all representative municipalities, both east and west, and then significant opportunities in downtown Racine and along the Lake Michigan waterfront. For sale alternatives close to established residential commercial areas are best. Relative proximity to concentrations of employment, shopping, and amenities, because if you have a residential community that's kind of a destination, you don't have to be as close as rental housing. in place nearby utilities, and schools become important. And I want to shift over to this because I think it's important to note. We took every school in the entire county, and 70% of all schools, according to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, are at least meeting expectations. There's 15 that are exceeding or significantly exceeding, and this is where home buying consumers with families and school-age children will actually investigate this, so it's good to have at your fingertips where the schools are and how they rank. There's another 30% that are not meeting expectations, and those are footnoted below, but a significant number of schools do exist that will be relevant for the first wave of for-sale development. Getting back, for-sale alternative, larger scale communities should be concentrated in areas with reputable schools and with a reasonable distance of major transportation corridors, especially I-94. But other development opportunities exist at numerous locations throughout the county. So the supply side is so constrained that really working with developers at multiple locations is really key to satisfying demand. Implementation. This is where I think we really want the group here to start thinking of housing in a different way. Value engineered, cost-conscious floor plans. Four-corner construction is acceptable if elevated properly. When meeting with developers, builders, or even leading that charge, you've got to think about how to bring the direct construction costs down while still producing a quality product that everybody is happy with, the consumer to the municipality to the passerby, okay? We had a client years ago who was building about 1,500 homes in suburban Chicago. And when you walked into their office, behind their reception desk, it said 1 + 1 = 5 million. And so everybody, of course, would ask, what does that mean? Well, he said, what I did was on both sides of my houses, I had 2 windows, and I just pushed them together, so I had to just case them once instead of casing them twice. And in 5 years, I saved $5 million. And that's an example of just saying you have to think differently about how to, it didn't aesthetically change the look of the side of the house. It simply was value engineering. Whether you do room sizes that are done proportionate to how drywall is already cut. It's thinking about things like that and trying to get into your mentality how to do that as opposed to not creating low-end housing, but how to value engineer. Subcontractors, I think, need to be educated because if you do things to a home, it's not a flat direct construction cost based upon what they've always done per square foot. You have to teach them that you have gone to lengths to change how efficient a home is. Some form of steady state production. What steady state production is if you can meet the price points outlined earlier, you'll have predictable and consistent rates of absorption or sales. That'll allow you maybe to buy things a little more in bulk and also allow for a lower direct construction cost. So that's another way where it doesn't jeopardize the quality at all. It's just a method of trying to keep the direct construction costs down. Scrutinize development costs and impact fees. Community orientation can be extensive but not expensive. Walking trails, pocket parks as opposed to a big amenity center. I mean, there's ways to do it when you have a community of scale, and visit other markets to see what can be done. If I can say anything, it is bypass Chicago and go right to North Indianapolis, to Fishers, Noblesville, Westfield. Carmel's gotten a little higher end these days. There are developments down there that are producing homes in the $150,000 to $400,000 range across the entire continuum that I'm talking, where you can see color schemes that are great. Front load and side load and rear load product. I mean, you got to get out and say, okay, I just saw something, and I saw it at a price, and I saw it at a density that I haven't seen before. I think it's really important to get out and see what's being done. And the north side of Indianapolis is a melting pot of seeing a wide variety of things. There's also a good apartment market there to take a look at some, I mean, that's closer in here to see things in southeast Wisconsin already. But while you're there, you can take a look at what they're doing. Okay, last thing. This is Milton Friedman. We have a little altar in our office for him. He's an American economist, passed away about 15 years ago. Anyway, we believe, and I've been with Tracy Cross now for a little over 30 years. Started right out of school. I've stayed there. I'm partners with Tracy, and I'll tell you, studying elasticity and how it works, and what it is essentially price goes up, sales or absorption go down. Price goes down, sales go up, okay? Everybody said for years, location, location, location. Now that's true, but we always say price, 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 relative to absorption. So when you look at the guide that we gave you, okay, to look at price points, use it as a guide and know that, okay, if you start going above that by 10%, for every 1% change in price, there's going to be a 4 or 5% change in what that absorption forecast is. And that's based upon how incomes gradually move down as you go up, okay? You're lucky that it's only 4 to 5% change. In highly competitive, where there's elasticity based upon competitive substitution, if you hiccup out there, a 1% change in price will drop your absorption by 12%. So when you get into heavy competition, that can happen. Here, you're looking more at income elasticity, and it's more gradual, but I think the reason I wanted to put Milton up here is to say, try to stay within the guidelines of where these prices, because they've been carefully set in current dollars as a gauge as you start to look at different opportunities. And that is what I have for you. Questions? Yes.
So this is very interesting in terms of housing needs and where people need to live, but what it's not addressing at all is the cost to the municipalities of the services required. So I'm from Caledonia, I'm a trustee in Caledonia. Our most recent economic analysis dates back to probably 2011. In that analysis, the least desirable to improve our tax base was high-density residential. So what do we do with that? Because I think what you're saying is going to increase the real estate taxes of the existing taxpayers, at least as far as I can see. I'm open to persuasion, but I'm not persuaded.
Yeah, well, our job and our objective was to outline where the opportunities exist in terms of bringing product to the market. I think it's the challenge, obviously, of the municipalities to determine how to do that benefits all. And we don't get into that side of it, but rather market positioning and how to meet the demand based upon price, product, and absorption and the relationship between the two. I mean, it's a very good question, but that is that is another exercise. Yes.
I just like to say, Fran, we've had this conversation before. That study was done before 2011. There were hardly any apartments being developed in southeast Wisconsin during the heart of the recession. Recent studies by Urban Land Institute and others have demonstrated that higher density makes greater use of public services, greater use of public infrastructure at a lesser cost. So,
yeah, and I'm going to give you this example.
I'm persuaded.
Yeah.
I just haven't been persuaded.
Well, I'll give you this example relative to what's happened in the marketplace. So let's look at the Chicago suburbs. With the exception of Aurora and Naperville on the southwest side, between 1995 and 2010, okay, so 15 years, you could count on one hand how many apartment developments were approved, okay? So not unlike a lot of areas in Wisconsin where the municipalities really were opposed to apartment development. Since that time, there's been 50 concentrated in the North Shore, and they are overwhelmed and thrilled that they have finally come to see what the rental sector and what the product can be and how beneficial it can be to its municipality. So there are a lot of examples out there that I think will support and certainly north and south of Racine County, right in terms of what's happening. Yes.
Thank you very much. Much needed information for elected officials. The one thing that was not discussed, though, was that public perception. As planning commission members and elected officials, when a developer comes into a community, it could be a very beautiful apartment complex, maybe even luxury condos. The opinion of the audience, of the people who live in the community, is extremely negative. Anything that mentions the word apartment, it's very difficult for elected officials to explain. It's not an apartment building like from 1950. It just is not low-income living. These are professional people who do not want to purchase a home. We've experienced it in Norway, and I think other people do too. So there's a lot of discussion that needs to be held with the general public to accept these types of developments.
Right. I think education is the key, and to cite examples of other municipalities that had the same reservations and now have changed their tune, and there are a lot of them throughout the Midwest. A lot of them. I mean, in my opinion, from what I have seen, Racine is really behind the 8 ball as it relates to rental apartment development, and there is so much pent-up demand, and you have income qualifying renter households leaving Racine County to find new construction alternatives. So it's really up to you. That's happening. Yes?
Really good presentation. In speaking of the hierarchy of products, every municipality in our county is a little different. And in the study, are we going to get maybe some individual data for each municipality? One municipality may have an overabundance of a certain type of housing, very different from another. And how do we find that out and know where we're at so that we can figure out how to move forward?
Yeah, well, I think one of the slides where I had a conductor sitting up there and it said needs to be orchestrated. Somehow a member from each plan commission or something like, some committee needs to be, in my opinion, and this is not my place necessarily to say, but something like that where they all come together and they provide the input of their own municipality, so when addressing the hierarchy, it becomes part of the whole in doing that. So I think it really becomes a collective effort, and that's one way to get to the bottom of that.
One more question.
Okay. Yes.
This is a crystal ball question, but what is the potential impact of the upcoming recession or downturn or whatever it's going to be on this model?
Yeah. So with what we feel Foxconn will be, with pent-up demand and an undersupplied market for years, and the fact that we don't believe supply will meet demand, even if that is halved, this county is in good shape for residential development. I mean, that's you are almost protected. You're not recession-proof, but you're protected in terms of what exists out there in terms of existing demand. I mean, you have 23,000 renter households with no new product for them. And at least half of them are of an income qualification and workforce level that want this new product. So, okay.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
So one of the things before I introduce Kurt is, out of this, we hope to have a Racine County Area Planning Commission where we can have representation either from an elected official or a member from a planning commission. We can meet 2 or 3 times a year as a body and talk about coordination or the orchestra that Erik had mentioned. So we'll be reaching out, and hopefully we can get participation from all the municipalities. But I think that communication and how we move forward, having that entity started would be a good start to, or a good first next step. So with that, our next speaker is Kurt Paulsen. He's an associate professor at UW-Madison. Go Bucky. That was for you, Matt. And I'm sure many of you know Kurt from his work. He's authored a special report titled Falling Behind. And then after Kurt's presentation, we'll have time for a few questions. And then what I'd like to do at the end is kind of take county executive privilege, and if the developers and all could be dismissed and then just talk to the elected officials on another issue for 3 minutes, I would appreciate it. So with that, Kurt, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. So it's a real honor to be here today. Thank you, Executive, and see mayors and other elected officials. So I'm a Plan Commission member, so I've been at a lot of those meetings where people are expressing their strongly held opinions, even if it's maybe not consistent with reality. There, you see, I have a face made for radio, so, right? People's website photos always have false advertising because it's less gray hair and less kringle on the belly there. So I'm going to talk about many of the same issues that you're facing in Racine County, we're seeing across the state. And so this was a statewide report where we were looking at a lot of these same supply and affordability issues across the state. So I want to really commend what you're doing, because I've been traveling around the state doing something similar and outreach on the housing issue. And so it's good to see that we have so many elected officials already working together. And I just want to also commend the county executive bringing people together, developers, nonprofits, municipal officials, to kind of work together and keep driving the energy on housing is vital. So you're kind of already a step ahead of many of the other counties where they're just starting to get around to understand these issues. So just a brief word about this report. It was funded by the realtors because they wanted to know what's happening around the state in terms of supply and affordability. They're hearing from their members that there is that real shortage of product, particularly that kind of entry-level, affordable product for middle-class homeowners across the state. So when people hear that I'm a planning professor and I was hired by the realtors, they always assume, well, were they trying to put a thumb on the scale or spin it? They said they did not steer what I said at all. This is my own ideas, my own research. They only said you have to write it in English, not in academic ease, so that people can understand it. So we've had good feedback, and of course, the standard disclaimers apply. 3 main message points from the report. And one of the reasons we call it Falling Behind is as we started looking at the data from all of our neighboring states, we noticed that we're towards the bottom as a state, or we're falling behind, right? And as you already know, workforce housing and housing issues are cropping up all over the state. I get calls all the time from economic development officials, from municipal officials in big cities, small towns. It's on everybody's radar. The good news is other states have undertaken a lot of innovative and potentially transformative reforms on zoning, on finance, that Wisconsin should or could consider. And I'm pleased to say that since this report came out in September, there have been about 5 or 6 bills introduced in the legislature to try to address some of these. One was recently passed by the Assembly. So when I talk about workforce housing, we use that term rather than affordability because some people have challenges with the word affordable, or they're assuming a certain thing. We emphasize the fact that this is the workforce we're talking about. These are people who are employed, who need a place to live. And as economic development officials know, workforce housing is economic development because a home is where a job goes to sleep at night. Okay? So it's the variety and different types of products that meets the needs of different workers, right? Whether it's your professional class or people in the service sector. So another way to think about it, if you're visual, is that when we're talking about affordability, we're talking about 4 things that really interact and play together. It's the number of units you have, and like Erik talked about, I'll talk about a supply gap. It's the prices those units can sell for, right? And on the demand side, it's the different households who might want to live in your community, right? Seniors, families with children, single workers, and then it's the incomes that they earn in the workforce. So when we are looking at this as municipal officials, as planners, it's how everything works together. And I just want to emphasize a key point. We will never solve this housing crisis without more supply, right? And that's very much what Eric's saying. But supply alone will not solve our housing crisis. There's always going to be people who need some form of housing assistance, whether it's people with disabilities, seniors may need special help to do home repairs, or people on the lower end of the wage scale. So, in the report, we have 3 causes of our crisis and 3 consequences, and just very briefly, the cause. As Erik already said, Wisconsin has not built enough homes to keep up with population and income demand. So, every slide in housing goes up around 2006, and then falls off in 2008, and the truth is, it's never recovered. So, the orange line is single-family building permits in the state of Wisconsin, much like the trends in Racine. Earlier this week, I was in Kenosha, same trends, right? So we used to build, on average, in a normal market, about 94 to the year 2004, we used to build about 30 to 35,000 housing units, single-family housing units in the state of Wisconsin, all right? Obviously, it dropped off because of the recession, but it's never recovered. So we're still under 15,000 housing units being produced. So both in Racine County, in my county, Dane County, and even in small towns, we're adding people, we're adding jobs, we're adding income, but we're not adding enough housing units to house the people. On a per capita basis, we're down over 75%, right? The blue line is your future housing supply. These are housing lots recorded in a subdivision plat with the Department of Administration. And those numbers are also way down, both in per capita and in raw numbers. And the report came out in 2019. I just got the 2019 year-end data from the Department of Administration. And I'm sorry to say, it's down even further in the year 2019. Right? That's your future supply, because obviously you can't build a house unless you have a lot that's been recorded. And then the green line is multifamily, same trends. So in a tabular sense, it's a little different in different parts of the state. In our 3 fastest growing counties, Dane County, where I live, Waukesha, and Brown County, you're adding far more people than you're adding housing units. And at some level you say, well, how can you add people and not add housing units? Well, the vacancies go really low because they chase the housing, or people are doubling up. So Dane County alone underproduced about 11,000 housing units. Brown County underproduced about 1,600, and Waukesha County about 2,300. Now, how that relates to Racine County and your neighbors in Kenosha County. If there's a job in Dane County, people are going to move there because there's not a lot of necessarily opportunities to live anywhere nearby. But in Racine and Kenosha counties, you're seeing job growth, but you're not seeing a lot of housing growth. And what that means is you're seeing about the same number of households formed as housing units built, which may look like you have a balanced supply. But I think what Erik said, and my data would show, is that what is happening is people are living outside of these counties and still working. So you're adding jobs, but people are living outside and commuting in. And I have a slide on that later. So cause number 2, as you all know, construction costs are going up. Anyone in the business already knows. Labor, materials going up. It's going up faster than inflation. And again, housing economics 101, if construction costs go up, the price of existing housing will also go up. Because any capital asset should price at its replacement cost, right? It's getting increasingly hard to find labor, skilled trades, and this is, since we're at Gateway Technical College, this is where those of us in the municipal sector, in the building sector, we need to create partnerships with our tech colleges to train people in the skilled trades, because there's a real workforce shortage in housing and rehab. Third cause is that we have outdated land use regulations in a lot of our communities that drive up the cost of housing, okay? I'm trained as a planner and an economist, so I wear both hats. When we have large minimum lot sizes or excessive parking requirements, or we require finish levels that are not related to health and safety, right? It tends to drive up the cost of housing. And Erik's data shows that, right? That whereas a house might normally sell for $280, if you require a larger lot size, brick finish, a wider street frontage, all of these things that add up cumulative cost that may not affect public health and safety, now that house is priced at $320, you've priced out a large portion of your market. Many zoning ordinances around the state do not allow the kind of innovative housing product that Erik was talking about. So planners, we like to talk about what's called the missing middle, right? We build a lot of single family and we build some multifamily, but cities used to deliver that in-between product, right? Whether it's townhouses or these kind of smaller scale cottage clusters or townhouses or row houses or duplexes, right? This is what cities used to build, and in a lot of our communities, the zoning ordinance does not allow it. And then we wonder why housing is so expensive and we can't get workers to come to our communities because, right, it's largely the zoning that makes it hard to build that flexible product that meets different needs of different sized houses. So 3 results. Housing costs are rising faster than inflation and incomes. So Wisconsin house prices, right, you already know this, in constant quality terms have risen 18% in the last 3 years, 25% in the last 5. I don't know about you, but most of us have not gotten an 18% increase in income, right? So when house prices rise faster than income, in real terms, that's like a price cut for for families. Okay? What this also means is that for Wisconsin homeowners, right, and we'll talk later about declining home ownership rates, on the orange scale is the interest rate, and historically these interest rates are low. But the blue line is the loan to price ratio, and what this means is that even those who are able to get access to credit in our state are stretching to buy the homes that they can afford, which means they're taking out a higher percentage of the house value in loan, right? And that shouldn't be the case if house prices are stable relative to interest rates. Rents rose faster than incomes in Wisconsin, in every Midwestern state, right? So we are not unique. Every state is having this challenge where our rents are rising faster than incomes. But I want to spend a minute on this data because it's kind of one of the key points of the whole report. In Wisconsin, incomes went up 18%, but rents went up 28%, which is the equivalent of a 10% pay cut. But we had the slowest rate of growth in rent. And that's largely because on a per capita basis, we built more apartments in the earlier part of the decade, so that when there was a surge in rental demand as people exited home ownership, there was at least some place for people to enter into. So what we know from that is if you want to keep price growth in line with economic fundamentals, we have to build more housing. Otherwise, if you don't build the housing and people are still coming and you're still adding jobs, you're going to see the price growth that exceeds incomes. So we have declining home ownership in the state, and it's particularly hard hit amongst younger families and amongst African American and Latino households. So compared to all of our neighboring states, we had a higher rate of decline of home ownership amongst young people than all of the other states in our region except Michigan, right? And so home ownership rates did not decline much for seniors who were already in their homes, but significant decline in home ownership rates in Wisconsin for the 25 to 34-year-old household. So the peak millennial right now is about 28 years old, right? So it's the largest generation in history, right? And they're all entering prime home purchasing years. And as my data and Erik's data would show, there's just not a lot of kind of first-time home buyer product for millennials who are going to be the largest home purchasing market in the next couple of years. So if we want to recruit and retain a workforce, we have to make sure there's housing opportunities, right? We had the largest decline in the state amongst African American households in terms of home ownership. And what this means is that if we want to really expand housing opportunities and jobs and workforce, we have to make sure that we're reaching out to all communities within the state and working to develop home ownership. In fact, we have the 6th worst black-white home ownership gap. We can't talk about housing affordability without looking at some of these kind of historic patterns within the state, something that we should really find objectionable and do something about. Okay, the third result is declining affordability, right? Incomes are going up, but house prices are going up higher, which means affordability is declining. So many of you might be familiar with the Realtors Index, or Moody's, I think, also does this, where we calculate does the average household, right, the median income household, have enough income to purchase the middle-priced housing unit, right? And in this issue, a score of 100 means you have just enough, right? And for real affordability, we want to see those numbers closer to 170, right? So, but that kind of misses the fact that that assumes that you're going to have a 20% down payment, which for a lot of our workers, teachers, firefighters, police officers just starting out, obviously you're not going to have 25%. So what I did is I simulated a mortgage of an FHA type product, a low down payment product, and we asked the question whether the middle income family in every county can purchase the middle priced house with an FHA affordability product. And obviously my county, Dane County, even the middle income family, right, can't even buy the middle priced house. We're really squeezed. But here in the Southeast, we see that your numbers are just barely over 100, right? So it's barely affordable, which means that your working class, your middle class families are going to have great difficulty buying the housing that does exist, even with an affordability product like an FHA. We do the same for rental, and this is where we start seeing that rental supply gap is really impinging on families in Racine, Kenosha, and Milwaukee counties, which really makes it hard to recruit, retain, and attract workers. So your scores are less than 100. So that means the middle income renting family in Racine County cannot afford the median priced rental unit. Okay? So what are the results? In Wisconsin, we actually have the highest percentage of lower income homeowners who are paying more than half of their income to housing costs. Okay, so we have to think about what makes someone a low income homeowner. In the data, these are almost all seniors. People who own their home during their working years, and now obviously their income has declined because they're on fixed income, but they're still paying half of their income to housing costs. That's property taxes and utilities, right? Wisconsin has the highest percentage of lower income renters who are paying more than half of their income in rent, right? So we have this really strange phenomenon in this state that we're not building a lot of housing. And yet we have these extreme housing supply gaps and housing affordability challenges. So, statewide, the purpose of this report was to catalyze investments and reforms at the state level. And we have 5 brief goals: build more housing, build a more diverse housing stock, right? Rebuild and strengthen home ownership, reinvest in older houses in older neighborhoods, and make housing a priority. And I'm just going to highlight a few of those and then pull out some Racine County data. So one of the things we talk about at the state level is there might be, and these are things that municipalities could implement if they wanted to address their housing supply gap, is some sort of expedited permitting or development for products that are really meeting the needs of the workforce. At the state level, we've looked into tax incentives to build more workforce housing, to reduce the cost. And then we talk about perhaps all cities could consider allowing some form of this middle housing somewhere in your zoning ordinance. It doesn't have to be in every neighborhood, but really opening up opportunities for a wider variety of housing that meets the needs of different families. We talk about perhaps at the state, and this is where it gets controversial, I'll be honest, right? Is that, again, if municipal officials really find it difficult to allow a different density and higher product mix than what their current residents want, one of the solutions to that, other than education and organizing, right, is that the state, and other states are doing this, requires municipalities to allow multifamily housing and a greater variety of housing at least somewhere, right? That's not very popular necessarily in the legislature, but it's one creative solution that other states are doing to kind of solve this challenge. There's other incentives we have in there. Again, as a municipality, you can look at the type of product that Erik was talking about and ask yourself, could that be built by right in my community, right? And that doesn't mean necessarily tall buildings for multifamily, but it also means smaller lot sizes, smaller houses, allow fewer parking requirements, maybe allow the road to be narrower. All of those add to a developer's cost and therefore make housing unaffordable. There's a lot of things we talk about at the state level in terms of financial incentives that I won't get into. All of this is in the report and in the data. A lot of ideas here in terms of finance, but given the time, I just want to talk a little bit about Racine County. So oftentimes, when you are talking about affordability, it's important to educate your community about what the numbers actually mean. And these slides will be available, so you don't have to read it all, but the way to think about it is a 3-person, 60% of median income family is going to be your kind of workforce that is going to have real challenges finding housing. And so that's a family that would make $38,520. So that could be one working parent with 2 children in a kind of lower level professional career making $38,000, or that could be 2 working adults in the service industries, and they're going to make $38,000, which would mean they could afford a 2-bedroom unit of about $963 in the county. And one of the challenges that Erik talks about, that I talk about, is we need to build new units, but a new unit of a 2-bedroom in this county is going to be about $1,300 to $1,400 a month. That's not really affordable to much of your workforce. And the other way to think about it is you can translate that into the house price that you could afford to purchase with that level of income. So again, a 3-person family at 60% of AMI is a $129,000 house, right? As Erik's slide showed, there's not a lot of houses for sale anywhere in the state at $129,000, right? Except in many parts of our older neighborhoods, there are houses for sale at that price point, but they are in significant need of repair. So one of the things I'm urging the state to do, but also municipalities can do, is help to provide an affordable rehab product for a lot of our older housing. Because we talk a lot about the supply gap, and we need to build more, and we need to build more variety, but let's be honest, if I waved my magic wand and doubled housing production in this state tomorrow, that's still less than 2% of the housing stock in any year as new. That means 98% of it is old. And in a lot of our cities, we have this beautiful older housing stock in established neighborhoods. And the problem is, it's just the market is not really set up for people to rehab those products, right? And so we have to get creative in terms of helping families, either existing seniors in their homes to rehab, upgrade the furnace, fix the roof, do some of that repair to keep up with the maintenance, or to help first-time home buyers who want to buy a home in an older neighborhood and fix it up with the product. Because if I bought a house here that's priced at about $120,000, right? And I want to fix it up to more modern standards, I may need to put $50,000 in, right? That's very difficult for a first-time home buyer as a entry-level product to fit that into a mortgage. So let me just say a few more things about Racine County and then we'll finish up. I always like to pull out the data so you get a sense of affordability in your county. Okay? Here currently in Racine County, because of the supply gap, you have over 2,800 very low income households who own their homes who are paying more than half of their income in rent. And for renters, that's about 4,700, right? So when we look at the overall housing issues in the county, it's not just whether you're delivering enough product at various price points to meet the needs of your entire workforce. We do want to give special emphasis to how are we looking at the burdens that a lot of the people on the lower end of the wage scale in our workforce are experiencing and difficulties in the housing market. And how this is related to supply. If you don't build enough new units, then when households do move in, they're going to put the squeeze on the lower end of the housing market. Those prices will go up fastest. The people at the lower end of the wage scale are going to get squeezed the most. And then one final thought about Racine County, dealing with the fact that there's demand, right? You have about 30,000 house workers who live outside of this county who commute in for work. And you have about 54,000 people who live in this county who commute out for work, right? And that really speaks to this idea that as a region, you have to think about balancing your housing issues with your transportation issues. You've got great transportation access with the interstate, right? But it also makes you wonder, these 30,000 people who are commuting into Racine County, is that because they can't find a decent, safe, affordable place to live close to where they work, right? And as we know, they're living in Kenosha County or in Oak Creek. So with that, I'm going to close and take some questions. How much time do we have for questions? 5 minutes? We have no questions. Okay. Yes. Oh.
I do have a question, comment. One of the ways that you, my name is Nancy, one of the ways that you recommended being able to allow the communities to be more flexible and encourage different levels of housing projects was through tax incremental districts. I will say that as an active member in my community as well as others, that we've had a lot of pushback to that. So could you speak to how successful that is in other parts of the state or country?
Yep. So I live in the city of Middleton. I'm on the Plan Commission, and I chaired our Workforce Housing Committee for 5 years. So one thing that we have done is we've been very successful in using tax incremental financing as gap financing for apartment developments that are financed with the state and federal housing tax credits, right? And so there again, the idea is that we wanted to have a wide range of supply, right? And that is actually state law, that you need to have a plan to provide the range of housing choices that needs the persons of all income levels. And we really had an issue that we're a very expensive city, so, you know, most of the teachers and police officers who service our community can't afford to live there. If you want a sense of our community, an entry-level small house, right, 3,500 square foot lot, that's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,000 square foot house, that's going to start at about $412,000 in my community, right? So our new construction rents are usually about $1,800 a month for 2 bedrooms. So we had a real affordability challenge, and our business community said, we're not getting workers, right? So we really want to leverage the tax credit program to build this mixed income, higher density, multifamily product. And that's where we've been successful in using TIF, because the more dollars you put in helps them score higher on the WIDA tax credit application, and therefore it can come in. Where I've seen other cities do it is perhaps some help in terms of infrastructure, or helping to purchase a lot and donate it to Habitat for Humanity, so that within a neighborhood you could have a wider range of kind of income mixing. So, I mean, that's the challenge, of course, with TIF. And I know this, I mean, I also teach public finance, so if you want me to get into the TIF in great detail, we can. But again, the reason we've seen TIF used successfully is it's part of an economic development strategy, and we know that if we're just getting economic development and jobs, but we're not helping to facilitate housing construction anywhere near those jobs, we have a real difficulty. When we were doing our housing strategy at my city council, it was the business community that showed up, right? We had a business owner who said, I pay $16 an hour for people cleaning offices, right? Which is above market. She's like, I can't get workers because they have to live 30 minutes away, 45 minutes away, you know, car breaks down, snow, kids sick in school, right? And so we realized if you don't build housing near jobs, right? Did I say your car breaks down, the kids get sick, you have to go home, right? If you don't build housing near jobs, then you better be ready to have a workforce recruitment problem, or you have to invest in transit. So that's where TIF can be helpful because it's part of an economic development strategy. Yeah.
I know both presentations say what, do not support what I'm going to say, but it's kind of like riddle me this bit, and I don't understand. The baby boomers, which I am one of them, and we're the proverbial egg going through that snake, okay, and we're at the end of our journey. And then on the other side of the coin, the birth rate is the lowest in modern history.
Right.
So if you put those two thoughts together, doesn't that mean there will be a glut of housing? Because the baby boomers are freeing it up, and there's not any babies.
Except the baby boomers are not freeing it up, which is good. I hope you don't, I hope you stay around longer. I don't think you're reaching that. No, the millennial, if you graph it, you will see that the millennial generation is higher, and they are at peak homeowning age, right? So maybe in 50 years we might have a glut in some places. But the issue is Wisconsin does not have a glut. We have a shortage of homes, and we really have a workforce shortage across the state, right? You talk to any employer anywhere, we have a difficult time getting bodies, right?
And there's also replacement demand, which is calculated into there, and
Yeah.
that is, you know, in any metropolitan area, and it filters through the whole area, is every year, at least, 0.5% needs to be replaced
Yeah.
through loss, through abandonment, demolition, or obsolescence.
And part of the difficulty is, of course, as people age and housing stock ages, the demand criteria of millennials is a little different. And it's sometimes unfortunate to think about, but I tell this to people in Waukesha County, right, which is your kind of larger lot 1970s ranch that is a dominant product there. A lot of millennial workers are not looking for that. They're looking for something that's a little more urban and walkable than drivable and suburban. And so if we want to think about, as a region, attracting and retaining workers, the next generation of workforce, right, it's going to have to look at providing a wider range of that style and product that people want. So, yeah.
Yeah, you have presented a problem which is all over the state, but in the county, like we had earlier question, even if for the renters are $1,500, $1,800 a month, most people perception, not in my backyard. So you can do all the planning for people who that's not in backyard. Now when you are talking about even lower income renters, so how do you solve that problem in your county? Like you said, they have a shortfall.
So part of the solution is that education about what those income levels are, right? And when people hear low income, they're assuming something that's not correct. I'm talking someone who makes $30,000 a year.
I don't want to use the word low income. I want to use the word low rent.
Right. Well, so, and again, state law says you have to plan to provide a range of housing to meet people of all income levels. So that's always been our strategy in education, is to say we want mixed income. So we're not going to have just a low rent building. It's going to be a number of units at different price points that meets different income levels. But it takes a public education process, and what it's also taken is you need to get the business community on board, right? So that when the homeowners show up and say, no, 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 NIMBY, not in my backyard, right? You do also want to hear from the business community saying, we need housing because we can't get workers. And that's where it's almost that idea of counter-mobilizing and educating people about the needs. But the other way to think about it is to ask people that certain logic. Okay, if you don't want these people to, where do you want them to live? Right? And the answer is anywhere. And it's like, okay, who's going to take care of you when you're sick, right? Because I do a slide of the workforce in Dane County, and one of our largest areas is home health care aides. They're living 50 minutes away. They can't afford to live anywhere nearby, right? I know one community that built a lot of retail near the interstate. They want retail, they want jobs, but they can't fill those jobs because nobody can afford to live there. And they're like, well, we don't want housing for the people working retail, right? So it is a longer term conversation to say, right? A balanced community provides housing for everybody. Everybody needs a place to live. And I realize it's a hard sell, right? But it's got to be something that we all work on collectively.
Thank you, appreciate it. All right, looks like I have 1 minute, so first of all, thank you, Kurt and Erik, for your presentations. I think when I said in the beginning there was some interesting data, I hope that you share that same insight after the presentations. Look, we know we're in an exciting time in Racine County, and you saw the numbers from the earlier slides. New industrial, office, and medical development, we are underway. I mean, that's a fact. 1,000 new jobs are already being created. And after receiving both of those reports, I believe we can agree that there's a need for more housing. Maybe the type of housing we can debate and talk about, but I think we all can agree, we need more housing in our communities. You know, we as Racine County, we want to foster an environment where we welcome our residential developers in the room, and we talk to them, network, and ultimately develop a relationship where we can get the type of growth and housing that we want in our community. So, two final notes before I join you in networking is one, I will work with my staff to share these presentations and these materials with you for sure. And then I also want to just thank Gateway Technical College for hosting this and recording this. Very much appreciative. And then we'll reach out for next steps, in, certainly in terms of that Racine County area planning committee, I think is important, and continue to network and whatnot. So you'll hear from the county RCDC in a little bit.